Welcome to Normal Ireland Live. I'm Ben Mclaine, and tonight I am joined by Samuel K, and together we're going to wade through the sewer that is our current political landscape. I was going to ask how you're doing, Samuel, but we're both unwell. We're both unwell at the moment. This is normal infirmary. This is, it's not Normal Ireland tonight. It's normal infirmary. But are you doing all right?
Yeah, we're gonna pull through. We were just talking before the show, saying that both kind of sick at the moment, but where I'm personally using lots of packets of Lemsip. That's the reason I'm there and I'm strong. But we're gonna get through it. I'm really sorry. When I hear you cough, I just feel for you because I know exactly what you're going through.
I just unironically I threw a pack of Strepsils off my desk a few minutes ago. It's not good. I've got to apologize to you and our viewers as I've got a terrible cough at the moment, so I'm going to be trying basically to not cough directly into your ears. If I do, feel free to dislike the video and tell Curtis that he's a slave driver for making me work in these awful, inhospitable, by which I do mean my own house. But if you want us to be able to afford nicer conditions, you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. Now, we have a great show for you tonight. So coming up on tonight's show, refugees from the Tories, Zahawi's fleeing the sinking ship to join Reform. We've got AI slop for murder, how the right is spreading AI misinformation about the murder of Renee Good. Lies and beans, the EU simply doesn't trust the UK under Farage. And the Telegraph cries tears for the rich. Maybe the wealthy should buy less avocado toast. Remember that we will be coming to your comments at the end, so please keep commenting on the stories as we go through, because we're interested to hear what you think as well. That's part of, I think, what makes Turn Left unique, is we have these things like the comment section, and we want to keep that stuff going. But let's go on to our first story. Tory Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi has broken ranks with the Conservatives and defected to Reform. Now, Zahawi is not an MP anymore, so it doesn't change the number of Reform seats in Parliament, but he is climbing that greasy pole like so many of them are. Now, those aren't my words. Those are the words of Nigel Farage speaking about Zahawi in 2022.
I thought Zahawi was one of those people that could replace Boris Johnson, to break us out of the old Etonian mould, to get somebody different, somebody who'd succeeded in private business before politics. I thought Zahawi had principles. Tonight we learn he's just about climbing that greasy pole, as so many of them are.
Bit of a hypocrite there, but always great words for your new boss to have said about you. But Zahawi has dished out his fair share of attacks on Nigel too. When asked if he would ever defect from the Tories, Zahawi replied, "No chance. Been a Conservative all my life and will die a Conservative." I love how principled Conservatives are. They're so trustworthy. And Zahawi said of Nigel Farage back in 2015, "I'm not British-born, Mr. at Nigel Farage. I'm as British as you are. Your comments are offensive and racist. I would be frightened to live in a country run by you," with a capital U. I find mid-2010s text speak really annoying at the best of times, but I suppose it's handy that it's all condensed now that Zahawi is going to have to eat the words in every interview he goes into. In fact, most of Reform's major public figures are just former Tories. Reform don't represent change. They're literally just the Conservative establishment that we've dealt with since 2010, right? Look at their MPs. You've got Lee Anderson, former Conservative MP, Nigel Farage, former Conservative member, Danny Kruger, former Conservative MP, Sarah Pochin, former Tory councillor, right? Richard Tice, former Conservative Party donor and member. And that's just their MPs. There's public figures besides their MPs. You've got Zia Youssef, who's a paid-up member of the Conservatives until 2024, I think. Layla Cunningham, who's a former Conservative Party councillor. Gwaine Towler, who was a Conservative and then a member of UKIP. They're all former Tories because they would rather change up their name, do a bit of rebranding, than admit that Conservatism just keeps making things worse for everyone. The only thing that the Tories respect, and the right-wingers in general respect, is power. That's really the only principle they hold to. Like, someone got shot. Well, they probably deserve it. America invaded a neighbouring country. Well, that country probably deserved it. The polling is moving towards Reform. I'll just join them instead. If you don't like my principles, they're flexible. If you don't like my principles, I've got others. Samuel, what do you make of Zahawi's defection to the Conservative Party?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this story is wild. Like, I think I'm still kind of trying to process it as well. For someone who was so, like you said, boldly against the Tories, against Nigel Farage, to come out and then do this. But at the same time, even though it is a wild story, it's kind of not surprising as well, because we know the continuity of the Conservatives and Reform and Conservatives. The fact that so many have defected, so many Tories have defected to Reform, and they've been welcomed so openly after 14 years of Tory austerity. What does that tell the voter? That tells the voter that there's not much separation between these parties at all. And it's so funny because during the 2019 election, you'll remember that Nigel Farage, under the Brexit Party, then stood many of his candidates down in those in seats to help Boris Johnson become prime minister. So the idea that we're so different from the Tories. Give me a break. Give me a break. This is the most that the Reform and the Tory party are peas in a pod, and I think that hopefully more people will catch on. The more defections, I would hope in an ideal world that people seeing these defections would make people think, maybe there isn't so much separation between these. But this is Britain after all, and sometimes you kind of conditioned to expect the worst.
Yeah, it always drives me mad how it's not just the Conservatives, but it's the right wing in general. I get the feeling that you look at their policies and you just, take Reform talking about like lowering the minimum wage for the youngest people, and it's like you just want to make things worse for like libertarians wanting to get rid of, like right-wing libertarians, this is like wanting to get rid of all parts of the state except like the police and the army, except the worst bits that authoritarians always use. It's like you just want to make things shit for everyone, don't you?
Just very quickly and tangentially, did you see the tweet from Tim Pool this week talking about gutting the Department of Education and literacy was a mistake or something like that?
Oh, yes, universal. Universal
literacy was a mistake. I think it's so clear. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ben. I think that I did see those comments about the wages of young people as well, and also I don't know if people saw the comments that Nigel Farage made about working from home. Did anyone catch that? Where he said that he essentially wants to outlaw working from home. I think his whole agenda is just literally serving the super rich. That's it. And it's so funny, there was also a story. This is just so many things about Nigel Farage in the news recently. But did you see there was this scandal about how he was selling gold online or something, and he didn't clarify about the nuances about how you can actually lose a lot of money with gold and stuff. Did you catch that?
I didn't catch that one, but honestly, it doesn't surprise.
I remember back, like a couple of years ago, on YouTube, seeing ads from Nigel Farage just being like, "Hey, do you want to invest in gold?" And I'm just thinking, like, this guy is the biggest fraudster in politics.
He literally is. Like, I can't imagine looking at Nigel Farage, like, staring over the rim of his glasses, doing the sort of, like, boomer look down the rim of your glasses, going, Big Chunga says hello and happy birthday to you and the boys, up the rah, and and being good enough to say that on Cameo, and then going, yeah, I think I'm gonna stake my flag behind that guy. Like, Zahawi is, I'm sorry, just I think a bit thick. Like, I'm sorry.
And then specifically on Zahawi, he was involved in, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of tax problems. That he failed to pay tax, didn't he, and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
This is a very dodgy man, and quite frankly, yes. On one hand, like I said, it is a bit of a surprising story. Wow, ex-Tory Chancellor defects to Reform. But on the other hand, it's a bit like, well, we know he's a grifter. So is it really that surprising? I guess what's surprising is the boldness of the grift. I think in the UK, the grift has always been a sort of quite subtle and not so in your face. But like, I'm sure you've seen the clip of that reporter this morning telling him, "Hey, weren't you the guy that did a tweet?" And you just read the tweet. You just read the tweet from Zahawi. So it's a very bold-faced lie, and it's kind of disturbing.
He said he'll be a Conservative till the day he dies. So he's got about like 4 hours left. Good luck, Zahawi. Like, But anyway, we do have a lot of stories to get through, so we should probably move on to our next story. We do have 4 stories and the comments to get through. So let's move on to our next story. Renee Nicole Good was the 37-year-old mother shot in cold blood. Excuse me, I'm going to start that again. Renee Nicole Good was the 37-year-old mother shot in cold blood by the government-backed militia known in the USA as Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but known almost everywhere else as those losers harassing random people just trying to earn a living and go about their day. Renee's death was then post hoc justified by the right wing. For those who don't know, the process of violence is known as cumulative radicalization, the process of violence that we see here. And it's been highlighted by Martin Broadstadts, Ian Kershaw, and other historians as the primary method of genocidal violence that was used by the Nazis. Basically, the violence would be committed by those lower down the chain of command, often to show their loyalty to the leader and to put minorities in their place. And it would often gain a nod of approval from those above, right? If you look at the historiography of Kristallnacht and the history behind Kristallnacht, the Night of the Broken, which many people point to as the moment the Holocaust began in earnest, and the policy moved from discrimination to extermination, or persecution to extermination. In November of 1938, I believe it was. At that moment, in the Night of the Broken Glass, the order was actually to pull back the police and allow the militias on the street to get away with what they were getting away with. There were very few active orders from the top. Most of it was post hoc justification saying, yeah, well, they had it coming, right? And I think it's important to understand that the way that cumulative radicalization works in 1938 or 1939, it works very differently in the internet age. It takes on new forms, as the justification is not just the word of the leader, but they can sort of try and back it up with new evidence, like this image, which is a fake image of the scene generated using AI. There was no aerial footage of the killing of Renee, but the people justifying it want you to believe that the ICE murderer had good reasons. Now, notice that the right-hand rear car door is open in this image, but if you compare it to the other footage, you can see that the door was actually closed. Her partner was trying to open it. Also, in the AI version, her partner is gone, and you can see just to the right of the car, there's an ICE agent with a rifle that has appeared. He's not in the original footage. There is no ICE agent with a rifle or person with a rifle stood to the right of the car dressed in all black. He's not there, right? All of this is unsurprising, but it wasn't the only way that the right wing sought to mislead people about Renee Good's death AI. Much more subtle, in my opinion, was this image, which, for those listening on the podcast, shows a criminal record and mugshot supposedly belonging to Renee Nicole Good. Among the things that she's supposed to be supposedly charged with are child endangerment, battery of a police officer. The only problem is that this criminal record is all fake. It's AI-generated misinformation, and when used in this way, I think this is far more subtle and effective than simply generating video or images of the incident, which can be easily pulled apart with footage like everyone now has access to from multiple angles. But there are a couple of clues if you look very closely. Excuse me. Firstly, her age is wrong. Renee was 37 when she died last week, so how could she be 44 in court record, right? Where did that 7 or so years go? Also, her name is wrong. Nicole is her middle name, not her first name. It also doesn't list her, a case number, mention what court these cases were heard in. It references a booking number, but booking numbers don't take you to a particular case. You need a case number for that. But okay, maybe they were just admin errors, right? Well, Limitless Media did their own search of the court records. Limitless Media searched criminal records under names Renee Good, Renee Shepard, Renee Mclaine, with the birth date of April 2nd, 1988, which is her actual birth date, in Colorado, Minnesota, and Missouri, and found no arrest record citations or charges in any state. The only public court record found was a legal name change filed in Missouri, not a criminal record custody case. Now, this story has been ongoing, and I want to apologise for covering it again, because we've done a couple of videos on this, but I really want Turn Left viewers on top of the misinformation and ready to call it out when it spreads, because this stuff is coming here. Both Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage have said that they want ICE-style deportations here. Those two are leading in the polls at the moment. They want us to be a vassal copycat of the USA. They want militia groups on our streets, just like in the USA. They want the Yankification of Britain, and we on the left reject the Yankification of Britain. We want to de-Yankify. But even in the USA, there is resistance from incredible public figures like Mark Ruffalo, the Incredible Hulk himself, who has been walking around with a badge saying "Be Good" in reference to Renee Good's last name.
Renee Nicole Good, who was murdered. We have a vice president who's lying about what's happening. We have we're in the middle of a war with Venezuela that we illegally invaded. He's telling the world that international law doesn't matter to him. The only thing that matters to him is his own morality. But the guy is a convicted felon or convicted rapist. He's a pedophile. He's the worst human being in the world. If we're relying on this guy's morality for the most powerful country in the world, then we're all in a lot of trouble. So this is for her. This is for the people in the United States who are terrorized and scared today. I know I'm one of them. I love this country, and what I'm seeing here happening is not America. It's just not.
Mark, why do you feel that this platform is still useful to spread a message like this?
Listen, I want to pretend like this. I want to be here to celebrate, and I am here to celebrate, and I'm proud to have a Golden Globe nomination. But also, this is not normal anymore, and so I don't know how I could be quiet, and I'm feeling a little sick, so it's hard to BS right now.
That makes three of us. I'm going to bring in the other sick person that we've got here, Samuel. I was going to ask about ICE being brought here, but first of all, I just want to ask about your general opinion about the killing, the murder of Renee Nicole Good, and just get your general take on it, because I haven't heard it. Obviously, because we haven't had you on since. So yeah, just your general thoughts on what happened there, first of all, if that's all right.
Yeah, sickening, disturbing. I like you seen the video, and it was very disturbing. I think America is in a very dark place, has been in a very dark place for a very long time, and I think that Renee Good. His death has really highlighted what's happened, but I also think that we need to, discussing that ICE has been doing this. ICE has been doing this. I believe a black man, I think his name, forgive me if I'm wrong, I think his name is Keith Porter. But on New Year's Eve, I know that it was on New Year's Eve, ICE actually killed a black man on New Year's Eve as well. So ICE is essentially now that Trump is using on his political enemies, and I guess my take, whatever, is just how excruciatingly evil this whole thing has been and how avoidable it has been. As someone here watching from the UK as a leftist, thinking, please just don't get him back in that White House. Please, just anything. Just don't allow him back in, because you know that, and as another leftist, I'm sure you knew too, that when he gets back in, he's going to want to seek revenge on his political enemies. He's going to want to shore up his power. He's learnt from administration one. He's learned from 2016 to 2019. The people around him have learned about how to consolidate their power. So this time they're going to put up a huge fight. So it's America's in a dark place. And quite frankly, the world, obviously, about the threats Trump has been making towards Greenland. There's lots of discussion there around how European nations are going to deal with that. I think it's a really dark place, and we're only going to be able to really, if we're ever going to get out of this, it's through collective action. It's through shutting down the means of how billionaires are making their profits. And I think that's a discussion that really needs to be had this year in how to effectively stop this, essentially a whole operation of these billionaires and all these Israel genocide supporters, because they're all interlinked.
I was just looking at the story. You were correct about the name. The death of Keith Porter, who was murdered and killed by an off-duty ICE agent. He apparently Keith Porter fired gunshots as part of a New Year's Eve celebration, which is like in Britain that would be shocking to us, but in the US that's not particularly shocking. People use their guns for celebrations all the time in the USA. It says it's a practice which is routinely condemned by law enforcement officials. But I think that it had a lot more to do with the fact, personally, that he was a black man with a weapon in the USA, and they do not like that. But I'm only just hearing about the case, so I can't judge that harshly. But the fact that ICE killed Keith Porter but we didn't hear that much about it is also, I think, quite significant.
I mean, obviously people are doing the best they can to get the information that they have, and they're working with it and in good faith. But I also think it is a separate discussion about, I saw a tweet talking about how racism is a huge beast insofar as that, this black man had been killed, like you said, by an off-duty ICE agent, but hasn't received anywhere near as much coverage as Renee Good. And obviously, it's not about comparing. And in this instance, the fight is against ICE. But I think in everything, there is always room to analyze. There's always room to be introspective and look at how people react to certain things and why they may react to certain things. But yes, I do believe that it's time for a coming together, ultimately, to be able to defeat what is essentially a Nazi Gestapo force on American streets.
I think you have to take into account those sort of like hierarchies of attention and care, because the cumulative radicalization, the violence that I was talking about, it punches down those hierarchies. So you can't ignore the fact that a black man in America gets less attention than a white woman being, and that's not to say that we shouldn't be talking about Renee, because we absolutely should. She was unarmed. She was an unarmed mother just going home from dropping her kid off. She was just driving, going about her daily business, and also her murder was caught from multiple angles, which does help her case. And we should absolutely be discussing it, but we also need to be aware of those structural hierarchies that are the root of a lot of ICE violence. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to ask you, are you worried about this stuff coming here to the UK, with what Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch have said? And what communities do you think will be most heavily impacted in the UK? Because it might be slightly different to the USA, right?
Number one, yes, I am worried. I think that the comments from Nigel Farage and the comments from Kemi Badenoch indicate that they are more than willing, if given the opportunity, if given power, to essentially replicate what Trump is doing. So it's a very worrying prospect. I do think that the community that will be, I think communities of color, will be affected broadly, but I think that specifically knowing the reforms history of particular communities they go after, and also the conservatives, I think it will be the Muslim community. I think Islamophobia is thriving in the Reform and Conservative Party. They don't hide their Islamophobia. And Elon Musk is egging that on with his disgusting tweets on Twitter. They call it X, but it's really Twitter. It will never be X. It's always Twitter. And I think this is one of the reasons why we really need to start pushing back now, especially here in the UK, this de-Yankification idea. I think also the idea of de-Yankification is popular mainstream. I think more broadly, outside of a left-wing, right-wing paradigm, I think people are kind of, they would like to push back against the idea of the UK becoming some kind of vassal state of the United States. So I think, it is particularly worrying that Kemi wants to bring it here and Farage wants to bring it here. And I do worry about Muslims, because I know that Islamophobia is at an all-time high in those particular parties.
Islamophobia. The other one that occurs to me for the UK is like transphobia. I think that's potentially going to be a big one.
Absolutely.
I just had one more question on this. I'm aware we're tight on time, but I wondered, how can we tackle the rise of like AI misinformation? Because you can do things like mandatory watermarking, but I'm skeptical about whether that's going to be enough, in particular when it comes to the like more subtle stuff like the faked court documents, so the stuff where they're being a bit smarter about it. They're not just going straight for the jugular of like, oh, here's a generated image of Renee, I don't know, firing shots out the side of her car. They're going for the like slightly more subtle stuff, and that stuff is harder to tackle. Like, how can we, and if people in the audience have suggestions as well, if you're listening to this and you've got suggestions in the comments, interested to hear them, but is there a way that we can tackle this? I'm genuinely asking you. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so you mentioned the idea of a watermark, which has been proposed. So it would be on AI videos to obviously delineate what is fake and what is not. But then what strikes me about that is the ineffectiveness of it all, because of maybe there not being that teaching from an early age. For example, like, if the government decides tomorrow they want to put a watermark on all AI videos, okay, but I just wonder how effective that messaging is to get that information out there, that, hey, everyone, this is the new thing now. Like, yeah, of course, you're going to get a huge majority of people, like, understanding that. But what about the people who just simply don't, who just, maybe they've woken up in the morning and their eyes are a bit foggy and they've not necessarily seen that there's a watermark and they've just thought. So I think it is a serious problem to discuss. I know that there are smarter minds in this area on this from a more left-wing perspective that can hopefully provide some kind of clarity about what the future is. But ultimately, like, for those who know me, like, I'm very anti-AI. Like, I'm sort of the kind of deaf to AI kind of person. Excuse me, I don't know if you can say that on YouTube. But I'm very anti-AI, primarily because of the environmental destruction, which is just what I've come to realize is just insane when you think about pristine waters that are being, so from that angle, I'm already kind of radicalized against AI and AI slop, and also what I see as the theft from creatives as well. But I don't want to go on too much because I know we've got other stories to cover. But in a nutshell, I think that there are probably smarter minds who hopefully have some kind of strategies. Because for me, I'm just kind of flat out very anti-AI. Sorry, it's my bias, if there is any.
Yeah, I think it was wonderful that I'm a big nerd about the series Arcane on Netflix. It's a great series.
I haven't watched it myself.
Oh, it's so good, and the art in it is absolutely incredible. Like, honestly, the best animated series that I've ever watched, and I've loved some animated series in the past. I'm not somebody that's against animated series; they're just absolutely incredible. But one of the things is that the writers and all of the people involved do not generate AI stuff with our work. It is just stealing from our artists. We don't endorse it. We wouldn't use AI in any of our advertising, any of our stuff. And I think the Fallout, I think, released like an AI generated trailer that was terrible, by the way. And got a load of kickback for it and had to take it down. So I'm joining you in the fight against AI. I think that in a lot of ways, particularly the used, I just think, yeah, and with who currently owns it, I think there is a form of AI that I think could be, reasonable one day, particularly for like generating ideas and stuff and bouncing ideas off of things like. But yeah, it's who owns it. I think is one of the biggest.
It's the ownership model. It's how it's done. It's the resources used. It's all that.
Yeah, the scale of it as well. Yeah. Although don't get me started on talking about how expensive computer parts have become.
Oh.
But yeah, unfortunately, we do have to move on. But if you are enjoying the show, don't forget to hit like and share. Share that YouTube link. It makes a massive difference to us. Also, we are still only a team of 5 volunteers who depend on your generosity. So if you can help, please do go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can become a one-off donor or a full-time collaborator with our evil lefty agenda. Also, we will be answering your comments at the end, so please put them into the chat so that we can respond. All right, on to our third story. So, it turns out that lying to people has a knock-on effect. You see, when you lie all the time, people stop trusting you to do what you say you're going to do. Like when Farage decided to lie about the European Union and more recently the ECHR. You see, Farage always treats these institutions as foreign entities which impose rules on us rather than groups that we're members of. And I think this is ultimately how a child thinks about doing agreements with other people, right? It's like, if I don't get it all my own way, I'm taking my ball and going home. Or at least they would if right-wingers had any balls. But judging by how they react to refugees fleeing persecution, I'd say that's pretty fucking unlikely. But Farage's whole thing is pretending that the European Union or the ECHR are foreign institutions that just impose rules on us from afar. If we don't have it all our own way, then that's unfair on us. And unfortunately, Keir Starmer's strategy of copying everything Nigel Farage does and pretending it was his idea hasn't been very successful. It's almost like he's the son of a toolmaker. So it looks like Farage is going to be our next Prime Minister as things stand at the moment. And pretty unsurprisingly, the European Union don't trust a country that is going to put Farage in charge, so have demanded that any agreement has to have a Farage clause. They've put these in place for much the same reason that you'd put down incontinence pads if you've got a young child. They know that British politicians are full of shit and you can't trust them. Now, according to The Independent, which is where I first read the story, the EU is said to be demanding that any future British government pay financial compensation if it reneges on a post-Brexit reset deal signed with Sir Keir Starmer as part of an attempt to protect against a possible reform government. A draft text of the proposed EU-UK veterinary agreement, which would slash red tape for UK food and drink exporters, reportedly includes a termination clause which would require Britain to pay a penalty if it leaves the deal, a stipulation which is said to have been dubbed by dubbed a Farage clause by EU diplomats. Now, The Independent also reports that the deal would increase UK food and drink exports by about 22%. Now, that's like a 1/5 increase in our food, so just over 1/5 increase in our food and drink exports. That is so good for business, and it's not just good for business, of course, because these trade deals and these type of things could potentially see living standards rise, more jobs for people, more money in their pockets, more investment in the economy. Like, that is absolutely what we need. And I think that 10 years on since Brexit, can we really say that we're better off now than we were in 2016? I just think Brexit has made life worse for everyone. And I want to be careful because it's always right to put the cause first, and the cause of Brexit is austerity. It was the defunding of communities and the feeling that people wanted to fight back against the establishment. But the establishment had people hook, line and sink, taken in through hook, line and sinker. Like, both austerity and Brexit were used by the establishment to make life worse. And as we now on a potential Farage administration where he's talking about withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights and the UN Convention on Torture, or suspending the UN Convention on Torture, I think now is a really important time to be putting forward and saying, hey, we have to start rejecting this establishment Etonian private schoolboy bullshit that is making all our lives worse and defunding communities for good reason. Of course, I'm told I have to support Brexit because of the will of the people, which was voted for 10 years ago and handcuffs us to the coffin as it's being lowered into the grave, apparently. And I don't want to be too terse about it, and I don't want to be disrespectful or anything, but according to polling, a lot of the people who voted for Brexit have now passed away. There is a real need to talk about this idea that we can't renege on Brexit, which was 10 years ago, the Brexit vote 10 years ago, because of the will of the people. Now, in completely unrelated news, not related at all, The Independent also reported Nigel Farage said he would refuse to hand over any money to Brussels under any deal signed by Sir Keir Starmer, telling the FT, "I would break it." He said, "No parliament may bind its successor. We will not honour any clause. If Starmer signs this, it is a democratic outrage. No parliament may bind its successor, but we have to stick to an advisory referendum vote from 10 years ago, or we are violating the will of the people." I'm so tired of pretending that this miserable terrorist sympathising toff is a serious political actor. There is a reason that you can't just pull out of international trade deals and agreements, and there's a reason no one trusts him. It's impossible to make agreements with other countries if new governments might come in and just insist that they don't have to follow any of the agreements that were previously made. Like, what's the point of trade deals if one party won't actually stick to the fucking deal? If no one trusts you, you can't make agreements with other other countries, and you deserve to rot on your own as an isolated little curtain-twitching island, right? This is dead country stuff to me. Samuel, what do you think? Are we a dead country? I get the feeling that this is like dead empire stuff, right? Agreements don't apply to us because we get to make our own rules. We're still the British Empire. That's the vibe I get from this, right?
First of all, I just say, like, I'm not crying. It's just my eyes. When I get sick, my eyes do this. Like, so I'm not crying. And also, Loki, you did make me laugh a bit because you said about this nation of curtain twitching. Look, I think from the EU's perspective, I think that it makes a lot of sense why they would want a clause. When Nigel Farage talks about leaving this convention, leaving that convention, you get the sense that Nigel Farage isn't a trustworthy person. Now, it's not to say that Theresa May, Keir Starmer, or all these other UK prime ministers were trustworthy, but you know, and you get the sense with Nigel Farage that there's a whole other level of untrustworthiness, and I think that is why you see the EU taking these preventative measures. And like you said, yes, it has been noted. A lot of the people who voted for Brexit are now dead, and I think that, you know, I've always been of the mind that politics moves. You know, politics isn't static. You know, it changes, it evolves. You know, things happen. You could have a vote one day, and then the very next day, something immense happens that changes the whole paradigm of how the country thinks. So I think that the idea that we can't, you know, seek closer ties or change our relationship in any way with the EU because of some vote, you know, a decade ago is absolute nonsense. And you know, Nigel Farage is a hypocrite because I think, you know, didn't he, you know, there's been times where he was saying that if he didn't get the result he wanted, he'd do it, he'd campaign again and stuff like that. You know, so it's, you know, he's just a massive hypocrite and liar, like you said. And he's, what was the word you used? Toff? Is it toff? Posh, toff? Yeah.
Massively. There was a poll that came out the other day, actually, because we were talking about de-Yankification a bit earlier, which shows that, like, sort of semi-consistently, 60 to 70% of the population want us to be closer to Europe and further away than from America. And I think this is potentially a real strength that the Greens could have if they play into that. And so related to that, do you think that this, like, Farage clause and all that, contributes further to our Yankification? Like, the further we are from rational agreements with the Europeans, the more dependent we are on Farage's friend Donald Trump. And, like, I'm not somebody who's in favour of nuclear weapons. I don't like the idea of weapons. However, if we're going to have nuclear weapons, we want a different system to Trident, because Trident, of course, is controlled by the Americans. The Americans can literally turn our missile defense off, which is, at the moment, you just think, oh God, that is terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it is terrifying. You know, listening to it. I knew that America was involved in Trident. I didn't know it was to the extent that they can turn off the nuclear defensive capabilities. I wasn't aware of that. Wow, great. We love that.
I don't think it's as simple as they literally flick a switch, but they control the. I think they own the missiles, or the other way around. I can't exactly remember. They either own the launching system or the missiles. So basically, without American approval, we can't fire off any of our nuclear weapons. Which obviously, I don't want us to be able to fire off our nuclear weapons generally, but the idea that the Americans are involved in that process at all is terrifying. But
I think the idea of the closer ties. I mean, with Farage, the closer ties with the EU definitely means that. Closer ties with the EU from the UK's perspective means that we are going to be pushing Trump away, which is exactly what Farage does not want. So I think that you know, when people talk about the EU, is like, no, I don't love the EU. I'm not like an EU lover. I mean, look at their silence and complicity when it comes to the genocide in Gaza. You know, that the institution has been exposed in many ways for being very imperialist. You know, and so for me, I'm not like necessarily like, oh my God, I love the EU. But when you stack it against the US and what you see there, it's like, I'll take closer ties with you any day. It's just a rational, you know, thing. You know, you have with the EU, you have measures, even though they are nowhere near enough to curb climate change. with Trump, you have the sort of an anti-climate change agenda, if you will. It's like we want to, there's the famous phrase "drill, baby, drill." It's really frustrating that sometimes you have to choose between these things. But yeah, like you said, with Nigel Farage, he completely supports the Yankification of the United Kingdom. And if you're someone who is like a middle of the road person, you're not really interested in politics, I think that should scare the living daylights out of you. It's something that should really give you pause for concern and make you think, wow, we really need to stop this guy. I don't want to be a servant or slave of the United States.
Yeah, I think the one potentially justifiable use of AI image generation is generating pictures of Nigel Farage wearing Donald Trump as a hat. I think that might be the one case in which I will allow people the one exception, the one good use of AI. But we'd better go on to our final story of the evening, so that we don't run over the hour too much. We're going to run over the hour, but it's fine. So on to our final story of the evening, as I was saying. You can always rely on the Telegraph to cry endless streams of tears for the rich while promising punishing benefit cuts for the poor and the disabled. Well, they published an article this week that is no exception to the rule, with the title "Earning £100,000 but too broke to have children, the brutal reality of Britain's tax system." Now, this article is quite ridiculous. So first of all, from that title, you'd think that they earn 100k between them, right? You'd think they were earning like 50k each or 70k and 30k. No, that's not what they earn. Matthew Griffiths and his wife were ready to start a family. Financially, they were in a good place. And both had high-flying jobs paying six-figure salaries. But when their first child, Olive, was born in 2021, the joy of bringing new life to the world was soon met with the sinking realisation that Britain's tax system would punish them for it. Because he and his wife Nicole were high earners, both working in the tech sector on salaries of £125,000 and £100,000 respectively, they would not see a penny in support to cover the costs until their children were at least 3 years old. So, just to recap, they're not earning £100,000 between them, they're earning over £100,000 each. They own their own home outright, and they already have a child, despite the headline saying they're too broke to have children. But it gets worse. Oh boy, does it get worse. The couple, both now 35, are also topping up their earnings by running a number of Airbnb holiday homes near Brighton where they live. In a good year, the flat would bring in as much as £80,000 to £100,000 a year. So that means that they're earning over £300,000 per year between them. They have a child already and they own their own home outright, and they're complaining that the cost of childcare and tax is too high. Like, if you're a poorer person, I can totally see that, right? But most of this they blame on the £100,000 tax cliff edge. So that's the idea that as soon as one parent earns £100,000, entitlement to tax-free childcare worth £2,000 a year per child is revoked, and access to state-funded nursery hours is reduced. Working parents are entitled to 30 hours of free childcare a week during term time for children from the age of 9 months, but parents over the earnings limit qualify for just 15 hours from the age of 3. By the way, that earnings limit is £100,000. I actually think that childcare should be universal, right? And we should just tax the income of higher earners by taxing their assets. Put a punishing tax on their Airbnb rentals rather than, like, take away the universal services. Like, universal services have a lot of benefit to them. The fact that I and a very, very rich person use the same NHS is beneficial to me because they're using their political power to push for a better NHS service for both of us. And I do think that a lot of genuine middle income earners, not these people, but genuine middle income earners, are struggling to get by. It is hard out there for most people right now, and the middle class people are starting to feel that, don't get me wrong. But the idea that you're earning £300,000 per year and you're complaining about taxation and childcare costs, and they say in the article their childcare costs are about £19,000 per year, which, okay, let's go with it. I think that is probably quite an overestimate in terms of what we need to spend on childcare, but they earn £300,000. So that means that about 6% of their total income goes on childcare. And I'm sorry, but 6% of your income is less than the average working family spends on childcare. Childcare is extortionate, and most people spend far more than 6% of their total income on it. The Telegraph and these rich people are just so out of touch. And the Telegraph has such a sympathetic view of the rich in the article, by the way. They say the top 1% of earners receive 13% of total income in the UK, but pay 27% of total income tax revenues, according to HMRC. However, this isn't the full picture, as that's talking about income. It doesn't take into account financial wealth and assets, as the ONS estimated back in 2022. For most households, net financial wealth was the smallest component of total wealth. However, at the top of the distribution, financial wealth was far more prominent, particularly at the very top, as wealth held by the richest 1% of households was greater than for the entire bottom 80% of the population, right? That's more money being held by, or more wealth being held by 1% of households than the entire bottom 80%. So maybe the very richest people in our society aren't actually doing too badly, despite pleading poverty so we don't tax them all the time. So, Samuel, what do you make of this one? Do you think the Griffiths family are struggling to get by? It'd be quite a twist if you turned around and said, yeah, I've got a lot of sympathy for them.
Yeah, my heart's bleeding. No, did you see the new God tier GIF that was released by Mandani and Miss Rachel?
The crying GIF, yeah. We're going to create our own one. Yeah.
It's on repeat for me. That's what I love that GIF. I just when it dropped this year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be using that a lot this year. And I think, you know what? I don't even know if I need to give you a response. I think that is my response. That is my response because, and also, you know, just the cheek of it, because this paper, you know, has gone after low income people. You know, how dare they? You know, how dare the government want to, you know, ban 0 hours? How dare the government want to increase, you know, minimum wage? But all of a sudden, when it comes to people on 300K collectively in a household, their heart bleeds for them. It shows where their loyalty lies. It shows who the paper is run for and run by. And I think, if anything exposes the bias of these papers, it's this. They're completely out of touch. They have no idea about how working people live. They have no idea about how difficult it is to get the bills paid, the mortgage paid, whatever it is each month, and make sure that you have enough food to eat as well. They have no idea. And then they come up with these stories of people earning hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. It's insulting. It is really insulting. You know, aside from, you know, the whole kind of like comedic. Here we go. I've been pretty good for the whole show. I hadn't coughed, so, you know. But there you go. Apart from the comedic aspect, it's very insulting to the people who have to really struggle to make ends meet, and, you know, living within their means. You know, it's really insulting.
I can't agree, Sam. Like I can't agree with you, I'm afraid. Mr. Griffiths is currently crying into the wheel of his Lamborghini, listening to you. Right? He's sobbing into the gold-plated wheel of his Lamborghini. Probably not gold-plated, but you know what I mean. The wheel of his Lamborghini right now, as he struggles his way to the. You know, he can barely afford the diesel in that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So like. Just on the free childcare thing, though, do you think we should introduce universal childcare? I think we need better universal healthcare, judging by the state of the two of us right now. Oh. But what about sort of universal childcare? Is that something you're in favour of?
Yeah. 100%. And again, back to Mandani. All paths lead back to Mandani. Yeah. You'll know that he has accomplished one of his key objectives in what is it? How long has he been in mayor for now? That's pretty damn good. And I think that this is something that we need in the UK broadly. I know it's a state that accomplished this, but I think more broadly this is something that people would benefit from. And I know that, you know, honestly, you know, for example, I know that there's some the child exemption, childcare exemption when you go over a certain amount. I think it's 125k, is it? I'm not sure what it is, but I think that, you know, in some cases, you know, you can see how some people earning around that, like if you're a single, you know, if single person, for example, or whatever, if you're locked out of this childcare thing, it's a bit, you know, it's a bit it could be a bit tough with if you're in a high cost area, high cost of living area. But I do think that, yeah, more broadly, it's an argument for more socialism, isn't it? It's an argument that bolsters our argument, which is that we need more universal services for people so that we can have a a happier society. You know, the burden of all these things that we all need isn't placed on individual households; it's collectively shared, and we absolutely can afford it. And like you said, just on very quickly about the point about hoarding. Yes, they're very deceptive with the way they like to be like, oh well, they're 13% of the top people pay an inordinate amount of money compared to outsized amount of money compared to how much they're actually. But I just think it's bullshit. When you look at the top 1% and how much money is hoarded, you get the fuller picture, you get the bigger picture, which is that these people are just completely locking up insane amounts of cash for themselves. It's not being spent. It's not moving. It's just in their account. So
yeah. Also, the relative amount to somebody with that sort of scale of income is very different. Like if I take somebody on, who's earning £200,000 a year, and I tax them, £50 for a year. Of that £200,000, £50 a year is nothing to them. But if I apply that same tax to somebody on benefits or somebody who's in a much more low income bracket, that £50 extra tax a year is like that's a significant amount to them.
Absolutely.
And obviously, yeah, like the further you go up the income scale, the more it kind of that disconnect comes. And it just like, yeah, I just hear playing in my head the Madmani. The name is Mamdani. Mamdani.
Yeah, that was catchy. And also just very quickly about also not to talk about the interest as well. That people who with huge amounts of money are accumulating on already huge amounts of wealth in the first place. So it's a scam.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think a 2% tax on assets had something like 76% support in a recent YouGov poll. And I learned recently that it's because like the average like asset accumulation is more than that anyway. So they're still going to be in the green in terms of like the interest that they earn on their assets means that they're still going to be earning, their wealth is still going to be increasing year on year. But it would raise an absolutely incredible amount of money for people who are like crying when the bills come in. And I just think, if we can do that, we absolutely like have a duty, Are you ready to go to the comments section?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
So we have Curtis behind the mic. Can we just test and see if we can hear you, Curtis?
Hello, everybody. I hope you can all hear me.
Excellent. I can hear you.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. This is an interesting show, and actually I think this comment section is going to be quite interesting because I disagree with quite a lot that has been said tonight. Obviously I agree more than I disagree, but there's going to be some points where I do have a bit of contention.
Okay.
But let's go through the comments. Let's have a look at our super chats. First off, Michael, just in case you forgot to smile, Thatcher's in a box. There you go then. So maybe if you were feeling a little bit ill and you needed some kind of uplift, you got that. He also gifted a Turn Left membership.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Andrina_W, which I assume stands for Andrina Win, gifted 5 Turn Left memberships. And we have, it's got a generous audience tonight. Ride Feather comes in with 10 Turn Left memberships. Thank you everyone tonight. Of course, your support means everything, and that money goes towards equipment and one day hoping to have a studio. If we could have a studio, it would be amazing. And I really would like that to be the case by the end of the year. Start with the first comment, and it is Michael again. He says, The anti-establishment party is looking very establishment-y. I think me and Callum were having a bit of a chat in the WhatsApp group earlier on about how it doesn't look good for, obviously, the Reform Party when trying to be anti-establishment, because they've just taken on high-profile Conservative MPs who served in the last government, which is ironic. But I don't know if anyone really believes that they're anti-establishment. What do you guys think?
Go on, Samuel. You say this one first of all.
Well, I mean, yeah, I do think that there are some people probably, and to the extent that there are some younger voters who go for reform, I would think that maybe they might have thought, this Nigel guy, let's give him a try, because it's just, I think for some people, and maybe not even younger people, but just in general, the idea that Nigel Farage and Reform could be anti-establishment comes from the idea that they're just literally not the two main parties. They're just literally not the Conservatives and Labour. And for some people, that's literally just it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Without the sort of like framework of left and right and like a good kind of working knowledge of the policies of the last sort of 15, 20 years, it is very difficult for like the average person who doesn't pay much attention to politics to recognize that these people who are streaming across, and I use the word streaming very carefully because shit streams, across to the Reform Party are literally just all former Tories, and they're advocating for the same policies to benefit the same rich people and the same donors like Christopher Harborne, who are they're just former Conservative donors. But unless you've got a real eye on that, that's really easy to miss. And I think a lot of people will miss it. And it's one of the reasons that the Green Party and your party have to be and we in the media as well, we in the independent media sphere, the independent media space, have to be active in tying Nigel Farage to rich people and Donald Trump. They have to be linked every single time. The links go Nigel Farage to Donald Trump to the Epstein files. You link those three things all the time as much as you can.
Edward Sexby says, good to see Sam on, by the way. We always love pulling up comments that give love to our guests. So I thought I would drop that one there. And Michael again says, and I think he's right, if you don't heart him, you vote Reform. So if anyone's watching now and hasn't hit the like button, right, do that now, please. Otherwise, we assume you're all reformists. Daz in with AI is so dangerous, people will believe anything they see on a video clip too without not knowing what they are seeing. And I agree with Samuel. I am very anti-AI. I know some of us and some of our viewers are in the chat who don't mind AI and probably don't like my take on this, but I would absolutely outlaw the thing. I don't think it brings any positive externalities to society. A lot of people say, yeah, do you know what though? What AI can be used in healthcare? Show me the money. Show me the money. Because at the moment, I am seeing videos of grannies going to chiropractors and they're getting slammed into the wall. I don't know if you've seen these really wild clips where, chiropractors are jumping on their heads because it's AI generated. And of course, the harm that comes with it in terms of Renee Good and many other things. I think it's one of these sort of, when you see these cautionary tales of films and TV shows where this magical power or technological power that's too big for human beings. And it's maybe we shouldn't tap into this kind of technology. We're not ready for it. I think AI is one of those.
I do think there's a big thing about the incentive structure, and I think the same could be said of machines that can take people's jobs other than AI, like self-service machines. The same logic kind of applies. To a doctor's surgery, if you're going to just replace all the doctors with AI to cut costs, yeah, that's a shit use of AI. However, I do think that there is potentially a space in the future when we've got, and it's all about the incentive structure set up by the ownership model for, a more efficient triaging done with help of not just triage nurses, but AI as well, to help pre-triage people and things like that, organize them into spaces, whatever it might be, that doesn't affect people's jobs because the people who own that are the workers themselves. And if the workers themselves own the that space, and that also gives room for the workers to have an impact on because it's not just all about profit, it's not all just about income for them, it's also about like, this is our local community, how do we want AI to be affecting things like the environment, which is of course I think that there's potentially good use of AI, but we've got to be so cautious about it, and it's got to be spoken about like the ownership model has got to be like at the center of that. I don't know if Samuel will agree or you will agree. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll just pick up my microphone. Curtis, I think I'm probably more. I'm very anti-AI. I think I'm somebody who could be convinced, hearing intelligent arguments like you said, like you presented, Cog, say, hey, we could use AI in this specific field to help with a breakthrough on this area. But generally, I will say that I am anti-AI, primarily for the environmental destruction it causes, and also my fears about the collective intelligence of our societies perhaps decreasing. But that's also another conversation. But yeah.
It's worth noting that one of the so-called godfathers of AI, when asked about the crisis of AI, because it is a crisis, if you ask me, he said the answer is socialism. Because where I completely agree with you, Ben, is that the problem at the moment is, and this is not just to do with AI, any forms of technology or any forms of business, when it's owned by the very few, it's always used in bad ways because the politics that underpins technology needs to change.
Yeah.
So, of course, he ain't wrong there. Let's move on to another comment. Urinification of 1972. Fascinating name. It's amazing that the Patriots wanted to regain their sovereignty and yet are pleading for Trump to take over the UK. Of course, we've seen a phenomenon of people who are basically saying, we want to return to feudalism. Daddy Trump, please come over and institute a regime change. Now, look, I think everybody knows that this channel is not pro-Labour or pro-Starmer, but I care about this country. And if Donald Trump, and by the way, we've had US politicians threaten sanctions on the UK if we were to ban Twitter, I think our government is probably the in who we should support over a foreign oligarch and a foreign billionaire paedophile. So it's very funny seeing the Tommy Robinsons of the world, Rupert Lowe, Farage, all those on the right wing. Part of their excuse for Brexit and why we should vote for it was national sovereignty. In reality, they want to give that sovereignty away to a foreign oligarch.
I agree. I think it's also important, and I think that one of the best outcomes could be a conflict where we say we're banning X, and they say, well, we'll put sanctions on you, and it pushes us further away from Donald Trump, and we get less of this like simpering, whiny arse licking from Keir Starmer with regards to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump and the right wing, the Republicans, don't respect that. They are cry bullies. If you want them to do anything for you, you have to grab them by the neck and punch them in the face, metaphorically. I'm speaking metaphorically here. Like, you cannot give them an inch, and you have to be. They have to understand that there are consequences to dealing with you. Like, in a way, with Claudia Scheinbaum, with Zoran Mamdani, Donald Trump sees that these people are popular because they stand up to him, because they are willing to stand up to him and say, no, fuck you. And that is so important in your dealings with Donald Trump and the right wing. If you want to get anything done, you've got to be willing to stand up to him. They do not respect people who bend the knee, you know?
Sammy, did you want to add at all?
No, I kind of agree with you on those points, and yeah, it's a matter of forcing and smashing these fascists. You can't negotiate, can't tolerate them,
can't debate with them, can you? It's not the marketplace of ideas when it comes to fascism. It really is.
Turning Point USA, circa 2018. Anyone?
Yuri Gibson says the ICE Gestapo has been increasingly threatening white women in Minnesota since. Good. Let's talk about white women, actually. It's sort of sentence I usually say, But let's talk about white women. And I think it's very interesting because white women and white girls have been the topic, the narrative, favorite narrative by the right wing, which is that we have a problem with immigration and asylum seekers, and they come over here and they're raping and killing our men and girls. And not just women, we've had people on right wing media in the UK say white girls as well. You know, young white girls are victims of Pakistani grooming gangs. So seemingly these cohort of people care about white women, yet when one white woman in particular, Renee Good, gets shot in the face for trying to drive away from the brown shirts, we've seen actually pretty vile misogyny from these same people who supposedly care about these people and say, actually, she deserved it. Oh, actually, this is the problem with this country. It's white liberal feminism. Ironic that the woke right are leaning into identity politics. They're now saying that actually, if you're a white woman in the US, you're part of the problem. So you see this massive contradiction because there's no sort of consistency in the people they care about.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to let Samuel go on this one first of all, if you want to go.
Oh no, you go first.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's crazy watching people like Tommy Robinson turn around and go, "You white broads, you don't know what you need. Let us do the thinking for you." And the thinking is just him banging his head against a brick wall. Like these people, like, they're so misogynistic. They do not care about, obviously they don't care about white women. It's just an excuse to be racist. Like, obviously they never cared about white women. They never cared about women in general. If they did, they would be talking to groups such as Mankind, such as the National Organization for the what was it called? NOMAS, the National Organization for Men Against Sexism. They would be talking to the Good Lad Project. All of these people who go into spaces and try to like push forward positive masculinity and ideas that men don't need to be in control all the time. So you don't need to reinforce that control with violence, which is the essence of what we call toxic masculinity. You know, we've spoken about this before. But instead, Tommy Robinson is a close friend of like Andrew Tate. Like, they've been friends for years and years and years. I used to do a podcast back in the day with Mike Stuckbury, who got doorstepped by Tommy Robinson and then the relatively unknown Andrew Tate. You know, these people are thick as thieves. And Tommy Robinson also excused and justified the. I want to be careful whether it's the. It was either the alleged sexual assault and or rape of Lauren Southern, who claims that she was raped by Andrew Tate, and she is a right winger who also interested for domestic abuse at the hands of another right winger. She was always like this trad wife figure among the right for many, many years, and made these videos about how the Great Replacement theory and all this stuff. And then she actually got into a situation where she was financially vulnerable to a white racist man, a fellow white person, but like a racist man. And a right winger, and she found that when you're on the receiving end of it, it is a very different story. I'm definitely not saying that she deserved what happened to her or anything like that, but I'm saying that there is there's a realness to it when it becomes you, when it's you that's having to deal with it. That is very different. And Tommy Robinson was justifying the alleged assault of Lauren Southern by Andrew Tate as well, and claiming that she was making up and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, sorry, so kind of a side tangent, but at the same time, it's just so representative. You just do not give a shit about women.
Yeah, Lauren Southern did put out quite a long explainer on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I echo you. I don't think I kind of add anything to that, but yeah, it's always been a scam. Tommy Robinson's whole shtick and the right shtick about caring about women, it's always been a scam.
Right shticks, that's a good one. Am I gonna steal that one?
Go for it.
The BS detective, and this is quite interesting. Apparently, according to the Mirror, the Tories claims Mr. Zahawi had repeatedly asked for and had been refused a peerage from his old party, same as Nadine Dorries. Now, on the press conference, Zahawi and Farage both said, well, look, Zahawi's kind of a rich guy. He could have just relaxed and rode the sunset. He didn't have to get involved in politics. And we hear that a lot from the right, by the way, which is these guys are actually rich. They don't need politics, but they're so good. They just care about public service. Of course, that's not the case. So first of all, I would rather they just ride into the sunset with their wealth of a massive part. When it comes to Zahawi, I mean, he got lots of tax write-offs and stuff. He's got some scandals there. But it's clear that, no, it's not about public service. It's clearly a personal position he wants to rise at the grease pole, and part of that could be potentially a peerage. He'd be offered a seat, obviously, but may get a peerage.
Yeah, would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Leonard, sorry, did you want to comment on that before I...
No, go on. I'm interested to hear what Leo's got to say as well.
So, Leonard Domague's, Leo, in a completely petty perspective, I pay £9,250 a year for uni, and I'm getting taught with and having my emails responded by AI generated. And I thought this is an interesting comment to highlight, because a lot of the discussion around AI in university and schools is through the lens of students using AI. And of course, I don't like that, but it's only one way. Yet no one really mentions the fact that teachers can also do it too. And Leo and many others who are now massively in debt from tuition fees are getting subpar teaching and subpar tutoring because they're using generative AI. And I think that the entire media have missed that one. I mean, a lot of people will say, well, kids these days at uni can put in their dissertation and essays through AI. And again, like I said, I don't think that's the right thing. But no one says about the other side, in which they might be receiving subpar education despite being in debt. There's no sort of indication from this Labour government they're going to reduce college tuition fees. It's probably only ever going to go up.
Yeah, it's being forced to everything as well. Like with Microsoft, what is it? Microsoft Office is now called Microsoft Copilot because it's got an AI thing in it. I was literally just updating Chrome before we started because otherwise the stream wouldn't work for me. And the reason that it was updating was to add some AI bullshit that I didn't ask for into my Chrome browser. I do agree with it. I hate the way it's being forced into everything. I don't want it forced into everything. But Samuel, go on.
No, I actually don't. I don't have much to actually add on this one, to be fair. But otherwise, other than obviously generally agreeing with you guys. But also have to flag. I have to dip very soon. I know that we've overrun a bit, but just have to just let you know.
That's okay. I mean, it's you say that we're actually got only one comment. I didn't start any comments about the final story. So I do want to quickly say something about that, which is the hilarious article from the Tory graph. Now, I mean, this is one of the points I might make a slight disagreement with you, Ben.
Whoa!
And first of all, what I do you know what I love about this channel is that we do have open disagreements, and it's really good. So I have zero sympathy, by the way, for the people within that article. In fact, actually, the more you read in that article, the less the more privileged they are. It's not £100,000 per household; it's per person. The Airbnb income makes me sick, of course. Yeah. So this isn't about sympathy for them. But I do think there's a very big problem with our tax system, because this cohort of people, like sort of upper middle class, are paying the highest tax burden out of everyone. And that is a problem to me, because those that were even richer, the multi-millionaires and billionaires, are paying effectively nothing. So what you can see, and I think Helena shared this graph of the tax burden, is you see a sort of progressive taxation up until these people, and then after them, that's where the cliff edge of taxes are. And then the mega rich don't pay anything. That's a problem, not just in terms of income and wealth, where Ben is obviously absolutely right, in which isn't really reported is the wealth side of it. Of course, yes, these people pay the highest burden, but of course they're not just income rich. They do have their wealth too. But I suppose when it comes to the even richer people, they rely more on their wealth. So I don't think that's a sustainable tax system. Also, I think in terms of trying to create a cohesive society, I think the anger in which you can earn £100,000 and then you do sort of meet that cliff edge of losing childcare, I think is a big problem too, because I think a lot of people might think Britain should be attractive for a lot of people. And if you're a middle class person who's doing really well, yet you feel like you have a huge financial burden.
Yeah.
Again, whether you think it's right or wrong, I do think that makes people feel like that society is not worth living in, and then maybe they should leave, because it is important to make sure that we have a cohesive society. An example of that is universalism, in which, where we do agree on policy, childcare should be universal regardless of how rich and poor you are. The reason why the National Health Service has lasted for so long is because it wasn't means tested. If the NHS existed just for lower income people and people on welfare, there would be no NHS anymore. But the fact that you can be a multi-millionaire and still use the NHS means it has become sort of a concrete tenet of British society, because it's kind of a way in which, I know we have class divisions, and it'd be ridiculous to say that we don't, as a Marxist myself, but one way in which we have some kind of social cohesion is through socialist policies like the NHS. So I think that not that I said these people should have their taxes reduced. It should be universal healthcare, make people feel like, even though who are extremely wealthy and have no sort of, I don't feel sorry for them, feel like they have a stake in society, and then make sure we raise income and wealth taxes on those even richer. That wasn't a major disagreement, to be fair.
I don't think that's even really a disagreement, because ultimately what I was saying there was like the tax should be on the assets. And of course, because most of the very richest people hold their wealth in assets, I think that kind of solves that problem, if you know what I mean. Rather than taxing the income, if you see what I mean. Rather than taxing salary, you tax asset wealth. But I don't know. What do you think, Samuel? Did you want to jump in on that at all?
I need to go.
You gotta go.
But yeah, but shout out to the Green Party. Shout out to Zach Polanski. Tax wealth, not work. Absolutely outrageous that, like you said, Curtis, people on high income earners are paying high taxes, but then you get those who are making billions effectively paying nothing. That's a scam in my view. But yeah, I do have to go.
Yeah, we could probably leave it there then. Okay, yeah. I mean, I did want to speak about the EU, but maybe we can do this another time. But I'll make sure I keep this comment for another time. But yeah, Sam's got to go, so let's close out the show. I'll hand it back over to you, Ben. Thank you so much for all the comments.
Thank you, Curtis. Well, that's all we have time for. Remember to like the stream, and if you're not a subscriber, then hit that button. Now, if you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a time contribution. And alternatively, as you saw just then, you can become a YouTube member for just 99p. Now, thank you very much to Samuel for joining me throughout the show, and to Curtis for doing the comments. And I wish we'd got more time to do a bit more of a discussion on that. I'm sure we can have a discussion. We don't do enough sort of casual discussion shows. It would be quite good to just sort of like, here's an area we disagree, let's have a chat about it for an hour. Yeah, let's for now, let's just close out this show. I'm Ben Mclaine, and you've been watching Normal Ireland Live, available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 7:30 p.m. And remember that everything we've had to cover tonight has also been a distraction from the fact that Donald Trump is a nonce who's in the Epstein files. Good night.